Well, I trust everybody can hear me right now. This is Scott Ritsema, and I really am happy to be doing this. This is a new experience for me to be able to get on this sort of platform. This is, I guess, is kind of a beta test because not doing big live events for me for this stage. I'm having to learn some of these online tools, but just I've got this chat window open. I want everybody to be aware of that. This is where you can type in your questions. And also, if you can't hear me or if you need me to repeat something, type that in. This is where you communicate with me. There may be too many attendees to have us all speaking over each other with audio. So we've got the audio locked down to, I believe, just Ivan and myself. And then you type in any questions or comments that you need in that group chat. Does that sound good, Ivan?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All righty. And I do believe we have some attendees already, don't we?
I see we have 14 people here.
All right. And maybe I should just ask them, type into the chat. We hear you loud and clear if you can hear me, unless, Ivan, you're certain that they're hearing me right now. Oh, yep, I got one right there. So that's good enough, a sample size of 2. So, hello, Sandy and Aaliyah. Boy, Mentone, I love you guys. I am so disappointed and sad that I couldn't be with you today. I was relishing and looking forward to this event. Some of you who've been around Mentone a while might remember that about 4 years ago, and you know what, I think it was 5 years ago that I did Media on the Brain at Mentone, and then about 3 years ago came back for a true education themed event, and we were going to do the big new media seminar called the Media Mind, and ended up only being able to stream some of that for the morning sermon. That was a little bit of review from Media on the Brain, as well as some new information from the Media Mind. Probably one of the questions I'll get during this Q&A is going to be, Scott, what is the difference between Media on the Brain and the Media Mind? People often ask me that, but let me just jump right into these questions since this is a Q&A. The first question somebody asked to Pastor Bowes, and he passed along to us. Because of our jobs, many of us work with technology all day long. How do we keep from getting addicted? Well, you know, that's me. I work with technology, with emails, with preparing PowerPoints, with researching information online. I'm on the computer an awful lot. I have the blessing and privilege to be able to, by and large, do that from home during the week. On the weekends, at least in the past, on the weekends, I would be on the road. I'd get a lot of the work done on my computer in the airplane. But at the hotels, I would always put the laptop on the treadmill. And I do this at home too. I've created for myself a walking desk. So one of the biggest problems with media use is the sedentary nature and the posture that we assume when we're in that media using posture. So that walking desk, where I just literally put a kitchen table leaf across the handles of the treadmill, and then I put my computer right on there, and I have it wired up to a screen on my wall. So that's my office. I'm giving you a little glimpse into my own little private place there. But for people who are doing regular jobs that require so much screen time that don't have that ability to have a walking situation, practice some good balancing techniques. Getting up from your seat as much as possible is going to help. And we're getting some major problems with eye health, screen sightedness, they call it, instead of nearsightedness, and skyrocketing rates of myopia because of so much technology use. So my dad was an optometrist, actually, and he suggested that I make sure to practice ocular hygiene, he called it. Take your eyes off the screen periodically and be sure to close your eyes, blink, because when we're staring at the screen, we tend to just hold the gaze and we don't blink enough. So those are some health principles. The real question the person asked here, though, is how do we keep from getting addicted? Well, probably the number one thing is not use media outside of work. You know, if you are a office worker who's using a computer all the time, then when you're not working, get outdoors, do physical things, find hobbies and outreach and ministry opportunities that do not involve a screen. And I'm talking to myself here. I got to discipline myself on that. We like gardening and lots of other things. So the biggest addiction, the biggest danger with addiction is diving into the entertainments that the media offers. And I've dealt with that at great length in Media on the Brain. So you can ward against addiction by just avoiding entertainment media completely, and use media as a tool and for work and, in the right balance. But, if you're using it all day at work, it's good to just, I've got some quotes actually in the Media Mind from Child Guidance and from Adventist Home about how we can spend our evenings. You can go right to disc 1 of the Media Mind and take a look at all of that from Spirit of Prophecy. Wonderful, wonderful stuff about how we can do evenings as families differently. Number 2 here, do you think there is media hype regarding COVID-19? Okay, yep, this is the thing everybody's talking about right now, the COVID-19 coronavirus. And the subsequent question on that is, can you also elaborate on the prophetic implications? So people are aware probably that I've done a radio show called 11th Hour Dispatch. I'm not doing that presently. I've thought about restarting that, but you can't do everything you want to do. And a video series, a seminar series on prophecy and current events. That one is called Second Beast Rising. And in that, I have the opening session is so prescient to today's context that we live. It's called the Hour of Crisis, the Hour of Redemption. So take a look at that opening disc, and it'll give you a sense of the convergence of crises that are coming upon the earth. And pestilences is one of those. How does this relate to prophecy? Well, you know that prophecy says that there will be pestilences in the last days, and that these will grow in their frequency and in their intensity. So is this one more intense than bird flu, than swine flu, than SARS? Yes, yes, and yes. So the question about, is this media hype? Well, as an analyst of media, I'm always trying to discern the deception, discern the angle, understand the ideological thrust, or what type of state they're trying to get people into, and just get a glimpse into the real motive and the real thrust behind the media coverage. And the answer to this is kind of complex. It's like, yes, there is massive media hype intentionally for a reason, but they're also, yeah, go ahead. What was that? So yeah, there is intentional media hype for political and ideological reasons, but also there is very, very good reason to take major precautions, like we did in not having this event. The virus, I think we've got good enough data out of Italy, out of South Korea, to understand the nature of this virus. And I'm not a epidemiologist or a virologist or a MD or anything, but just looking at this from as a media analyst, yes, there is hype. There are certain sectors that are delighting in crisis because of their political ideology and agendas, but also there is very real reason for us to take precautions and be prudent with this. But yeah, prophetic implications is really where we want to dwell and tell the world. Now's a great time for us to focus on our message, right? And to get out the truth that this is the last days, and these things are becoming massive in their proportions like never before. I mean, this is historic, what has just taken place in the last week. Is it not? I mean, last weekend, I was in the airports, and it was like nothing was going on. And I was already a little bit precautionary. I was wearing the mask, and I had my silver to spray on the mask, and I was doing the hand sanitizing with my Dr. Bronner's, and I was like the weirdo in the airports. And the screenings, there was nothing going on in terms of screenings. And so I thought, this is strange. Just fast forward a couple of days from last weekend when there's no problem, and the store shelves are empty, and everybody's freaking out, and 40% drop in travel, in air travel. It's like, wow, that happened overnight, didn't it? And so people are ready now more than ever to receive our message. So instead of filling my car with toilet paper, yesterday I went to the grocery store in Michigan where I live. It's called Meijer, and I filled up my car with oranges. And what we're going to do as a family is an outreach, because we're not doing public meetings right now. So how can we get the message out? Personal work. The kids in Michigan are all out of school. And 40% of public school kids in Michigan qualify for free and reduced lunch. So a lot of these kids rely on their school lunches as their, if you can call it, their best nutrition of the day. So what if we bring Media on the Brain DVDs, Steps to Christ, and a baggie of oranges door to door to all of these poverty-stricken neighborhoods and spread the truth? So yeah, prophetic implications, great question, number 2 there about COVID-19. For those who just joined us, feel free to add your questions to the list, and we'll just keep on rolling right through this. People who are just joining, you might be familiar with the Media on the Brain seminar. This is Scott Ritsema's voice you're hearing. I would have been at your church today to do the Media Mind seminar, and I miss you guys terribly because there are some gems, some real needles in the haystack, real diamonds that I've gotten to know. Mentone is one of those, and I always speak highly of you guys everywhere I go. I believe in your values, and I see you guys have been exploding into 2 services, and I wish I could have seen the hundreds and hundreds of you today, but here we go with a new way of doing life, which leads to question number 3. What is the best age to introduce media to our children? Boy, do you have 5 hours. The new seminar called The Media Mind. I'll just answer this question that nobody asked yet, but it's the most common question I get asked. People say, what is the difference between your previous seminar on media called Media on the Brain and this new one called The Media Mind? One of the key differences is the Media Mind actually deals with this question to a much greater degree than Media on the Brain did. Okay, Pastor Rodney says someone mentioned they can't hear very well. If you have trouble, you may want to switch to the YouTube live stream. Try that out, everybody. And Ivan, if you suggest I make any changes, just jump in anytime, okay? So the Media Mind seminar answers this question fairly thoroughly. I say fairly because I don't like to dictate what everybody ought to do, but I can give you very good research and information on the effects of media on child development. And I can quote what the American Academy of Pediatrics and what the World Health Organization suggests with regard to this question: what is the best age to introduce media to children? Number 3 that was asked. I probably, before telling you what the WHO says, I should give you some background on why they would make such a dramatic statement. What they've found, the American Academy of Pediatrics has always said for many years that children under 2 should have no media use at all. 18 to 24 months, 0 media use at all, with the exception of maybe grandma's on the FaceTime on mom's phone and you check in and talk to the toddler for a minute, but it's talking about childhood media use, watching TV, playing the little games. In my new seminar, I have this video of a baby using an iPad. This is also on disc 1 of the Media Mind. The baby's using the iPad and like a 12-month-old, and then they take the iPad away and they give the baby a magazine. And the baby doesn't know how to use the magazine. The baby is touching and tapping and swiping the pages of the magazine as if it's a screen. And so you've seen the session, How to Be Human Again, and you saw the iPotty and the iPad activity seat for children. And it makes us all alarmed to see this coming in, because what Dr. Dimitri Christakis talks about with early childhood media use is that they don't learn anything from media use. Educational iPad apps, it's going to be so great for them, right? Because then they can learn block stacking or whatever. You're going to do a block stacking app on the iPad and you're going to help your baby become better at blocks. But what you're all thinking, why don't you just have them stacking blocks? I know we've lost common sense. We have to make everything screen-based and shiny and fun and entertaining. And what Christakis has found in his research is that children who do a block stacking app on an iPad are no better at block stacking than children who never played the app. He says it does nothing for them and they have to start all over. It does worse than nothing. It actually harms child development, verbal skills, social and emotional intelligence. You go down the list, behavioral issues, addiction, mental health problems, all from just 1 hour of screen time per day from in early childhood. And that's not just babies and toddlers. That goes on up into the elementary years. So dealing with this issue of at what age, it's going to be most harmful at the earliest ages. And let's flip that around to the positive. The things that we do that are good in our preschoolers' lives are that much more helpful for them in those early years than if we wait and do it later. So I just want to quote The Desire of Ages for you. It's a wonderful quotation. I don't have all my notes in front of me, so I don't have the reference, but this one is also in disc. I believe this one's in disc 2 of the Media Mind. And it says, the more quiet and simple the life of the child, the more free from artificial excitement, and the more in harmony with nature, the better it is for spiritual and mental development, and so on. I'm paraphrasing, but that's almost word for word there from The Desire of Ages. So people ask, Scott, give us your screen time recommendations. Well, I could say the World Health Organization says 0 media till age 5 if you can do it. You might say, that sounds impossible. That sounds crazy. They said the less media, the better till age 5. And so rather than me laying down, at age 5, I think you should do this much and this kinds of media and giving a prescription to people, my screen time recommendations are just quoting The Desire of Ages for you. I'll do it again. The more quiet and simple the life of the child, the more free from artificial excitement, and the more in harmony with nature, the better it is for spiritual and mental development and strength. So that should be good enough for us. Now, when we're dealing with mental health, that kind of is what number 4 is asking about. People who go through cycles enjoying life or finding it lackluster. It doesn't matter if they're involved with addictions or not. How can they deal with that? That's a mental state, emotional health question. And so I want to cite and quote Dr. Victoria Dunkley. She has an incredible book, and we actually carry this one on our website. It's called Reset Your Child's Brain. It's coming from a secular standpoint, so understand it's science-based, and you'd have to weave in the spiritual applications. But in that book, Dr. Dunkley talks about mainly children and adolescents' mental health, but the same principles of how to do life to maximize your joy and thriving will apply to adults as it does to children and youth. And what she points out in that book, she's a psychiatrist. She has treated hundreds of predominantly adolescents who are struggling with all the named disorders, from depression, that kind of what number 4 is talking about. The question number 4, if you're feeling lackluster in life, but she's dealing not with just depression, but she's dealing with ADHD. She's treating, as a psychiatrist, she's treating DMDD. You might not know what that one is. That's called disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. And so people not able to regulate their impulses and so on. And she says, okay, you've tried the pharmaceutical prescription. I don't have a prescription for you. Here's my prescription. A 3-week media fast. And by fast, she means totally abstaining from any screen time at all for 3 weeks. And that's not necessarily how the kid is going to live forever, but you're doing a detox. She's calling it the reset your child's brain. And the brain can change in powerful, fundamental ways in just 3 weeks. And that's exactly what she's found in her clinical experience. She's tracked the numbers. Get this. She's treated hundreds of children with diagnosed disorders. And she's found that the majority, that 50% of these patients have the majority of their symptoms disappear in just 3 weeks of no media. And 80% of her patients have all their symptoms, or 80% of their symptoms. Let me start that one over. Hopefully this isn't being recorded. I don't have my notes in front of me. 80% have the majority of their symptoms disappear, and 50% have all of their symptoms disappear. I apologize, I stated that backwards. 80% of her patients have the majority of their symptoms disappear, and 50% of her patients have all of their symptoms disappear. So hopefully I cleared that up by saying it twice. If I didn't, send me an email. Let me type in my email address for anybody on this, and you can always send me more questions on email anytime. And if you want to be on our newsletter, please send me an email, say add me to the newsletter, and you'll hear updates from me periodically because I'm having to go to more online stuff. This is a crazy feeling for me. I've been doing this now for 7.5 years, full time for 6 years. And I always travel and speak. That's what I do most of the year, most weekends of the year. And I just stayed home Friday morning and it was a weird feeling. And I'm trying to reinvent, okay, what is Belt of Truth Ministries like now for the time being, at least, with us not having large events and I'm not traveling because, travel and gathering large groups is what we're not supposed to be doing right now. And travel and gathering large groups is what I do. So I don't do what I do anymore. So I've been praying, the thing about the oranges, that was a result of, all right, let's just do something, And that kind of brings us back also to this media question. What are these kids doing instead of media? And what are we all doing instead of media? If we're trying to reduce our media use time, then this question number 4 was a great question, where you feel the ups and downs with life. Go to those things that you feel joy when you do them. Hiking, service, cooking, building things, fixing things, visiting people, whatever it is that kind of snaps you out of that stupor. We sometimes, like the negativity begets negativity, you know what I mean? Where we feel low, and so we just want to think about how we feel low, and we just kind of just feel more low. And you got to break that cycle by just stepping out and doing something that will help snap you out of it. Like I was feeling stressed the other day. I looked at my wife and I'm like, this body needs to move. I need to get out of this house. So we're going to drop all the work we're doing right now. And we're going for a walk. And I mean, not a normal walk that we live by a lake. And normally we drive down to the lake and do a 45-minute walk beside the lake. I said, no, we're walking to the lake this time. It's springtime. It's beautiful. And all of a sudden you feel better. So find those little tricks that work for you. And it's all God's methods of healthy living. God has given us a health message. And the better we align with that and his laws for life, then the more joy we will find. And that's the great thing, even about a lady like Victoria Dunkley, who wrote the Reset Your Child's Brain book. If you wanted the name of that book again, that was it. The lady who found 80% of the patients had the majority of their symptoms disappear just from 3 weeks media fast. They weren't just going into an empty room to stare at a blank wall and watch the paint dry. No, these kids were getting outdoors. They were doing better things, and we can all do that and reduce that media time. And it helps with mental health. It helps with addictions. It helps with relationships. And most importantly, it helps with spiritual things. Now, one thing I haven't dealt with in these questions, and I'm not seeing more questions come in, so I'll just ask a question. And it's sort of a distinction that I need to draw between worldly media that is toxic and utilizing screen time and digital tools in a God-glorifying way. So we can talk media, but what kind of media are we discussing? We can't condemn all media. You remember 1844 was the birth of modern media? I think you might have heard that factoid from me. 1844 was when the telegraph was invented. And so God wants us to use media to get the truth out, right? So right now we're using media. We're using it in a balanced and positive way. But then there's this other thing called the entertainment industry. And there's this thing called video game addiction, and so much social media use that I get addicted to that, or it causes all sorts of disruptions in my emotional health. And so there's worldly media, harmful media, and then there's good uses of media. We've got to draw that distinction. That's one of the main differences between media on the brain and the media mind. Media on the brain was mostly like exposing the entertainment industry and theatrical entertainment and the video game industry and Hollywood and the music industry and the advertising manipulation and all of that. And when it comes to that, the dose that we should be taking of that is 0. The Bible says, come apart and be separate, saith the Lord. Touch no unclean thing and I will receive you. So we're not looking for like a balanced use of worldly media. We want to find the right balance of good and healthy media. All right, question number 5. Does FaceTime count as media use? Relatives who want to talk to each other through the phone. Is there research showing this to be harmful to infants? No. In fact, that's the one thing Dr. Dimitri Christakis, who's probably the leading expert on early childhood media use, makes the exception for. He says, just keep your kids completely off media in those early years. And you can pick the age at which you want to do that. And I'll let something slip right now because this is a little small group here. I don't like telling people too much because then they take it as the rule. But what we did is we waited till our kids, our middle child is 5 right now, and so we started showing informational spiritual videos to the 5 and 7-year-old together. And so that's a long time to wait. We did like literally nothing before that except FaceTime because the kids would FaceTime with grandma. I FaceTime with them. Hello, I'm on the road so much. I want to talk to my kids. And so we did a lot of that when they're 2 and when they're 4 and when they're whenever. But we do start to introduce some good media, and that's no interactive media. They're not touching, tapping, swiping devices at 5 and 7. Video games are never going to be a part of my family's life. I think video games should be banned from every household by the law of mother and father because they're addictive. Your kid's brain on Minecraft looks like a brain on drugs. I'm quoting Dr. Nicholas Kardaras, author of the book Glow Kids. He says, I've treated hundreds of heroin addicts. It's easier to treat a heroin addict than a true screen addict. So yeah, video games are gone, but we show, I used to say slow paced. The pacing of the video that you're showing to your children is key. I used to say slow paced, but that makes it sound boring. We shouldn't be bored. Boredom is a uniquely modern concept that's rooted in our overstimulation that makes our brains expect high levels of input. So I don't like the word slow paced. We don't use the word bored in our family. We use nature paced. Nature-paced videos. And you can have nature videos that are not nature-paced, but nature-paced, informational, spiritual, educational, quality content that they are viewing. We started that sort of thing at 5. So this person asked about FaceTime. I think I answered the FaceTime, but we don't really count that. They're not sitting there staring at the screen, touching and playing with it for half an hour. Relatives who want to do it. Yeah. Okay. The next one question. Oh, we just did question 5. Okay. Now I've got, how about doctor at 3 p.m. just audio? I think that's an internal question there for Ivan. I don't have any other questions here, but come on. We got 10 more minutes together. What shall I talk to you guys about in 10 minutes? Text me, type in something. I'll stand by. That was my opportunity to take in a lot of water there. I don't have time to stop and drink when I'm talking because one thought leads to the next and we just keep on marching through.
I just had a thought that you mentioned Minecraft, and I remember back in the day they had just little simple games that you could play. And then even I myself got addicted to these fantasy worlds, World of Warcraft, EverQuest,
Totally.
things like that. And those really suck you in. And that was probably 10 years ago. And now just the graphics and everything is so real. It's probably hard to distinguish between that and reality.
That is so true, Ivan. And it's meant to be a replacement for reality. It's virtual reality. I like to call it the counterfeit reality, which is fascinating because didn't Satan want to be in the position of God? And then he couldn't be a creator because he's a created being. But he now can create a world. Jesus created this world and spoke it into existence. And Satan couldn't do that. So he's already disproven that he can't be in the position of God. But now he thinks, oh yeah, I'll create false online virtual worlds in the video game Counterfeit. People will get immersed in that as if it is their life's purpose and quest. And how many hours would you spend in that when you were addicted? I've talked to former pastors who are former video gaming addicts, and they're like, oh yeah, I'd play all night.
Oh, that was easy. We had a guild and we were best in the world for some time there. And I would play 6 hours a night or 7 hours a night, 6 nights a week.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I'm seeing texts that folks are ready for the good doctor to come in. Ivan, do you want to wrap this up? Oh, I got another one. Hi, Scott. Is there any video game that is good? It's all relative. That's a good question, June Cruz. they try to put out pro-social games, and there are Christians who are like, we're going to make the Christian games. And I applaud that effort. And you might even see some good fruits born out of it. It's not the medium I would choose because it can still become an addictive medium. And, God chooses to use things that are not necessarily the ideal chosen instrument normally, like he had the donkey speak to Balaam, but we don't necessarily adopt the donkey as our means, go door to door canvassing with a donkey, hoping the donkey will speak up. So the same concept with, God will use, I believe, these Christian movies that are theatrical and problematic on certain levels, and or Christian bands that are banging away with terrible sounds, but God will utilize people's efforts even though there's a lot of flaws there. I look in the mirror and thank him for that. But I don't want to endorse quote good video games. I would never want to do that because they can it's still a counterfeit and an addictive, mind altering, brain harming, and potentially life stealing platform. This one says, I'm getting a bunch of quotes now. This is great. You want me to go right up to 540 with these?
Yeah,
My nephew grew up with his grandmother giving him her phone. Now he's almost 15 years old and doesn't like reading due to so much media use. What do you recommend to encourage picking up a book? Answer, putting down the device. A love for reading cannot compete with media addiction. You've got to break that media addiction. And it says in, I think it's the book Education. If it's not, it's in like Councils of Parents, Teachers, and Students or something like that. And it says, if the youth had not had their tastes spoiled by the reading of fiction, they would pronounce the Bible to be the most interesting book they had ever read. That's a quote from Ellen G. White. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, how much more are we spoiling our appetites with the use of these media devices and entertainments than fiction reading? I have a session in the Media Mind on reading books. I'm so glad that Radames Mendoza asked that question about book reading, because I've got a new session called People of the Book in the Age of the App. And so I want to encourage everybody after sundown to go to beltoftruth.tv. I'm typing it in right there. It's our subscription site where you can watch all our stuff. Go right to disc 5 of the Media Mind, and you'll see the session called People of the Book in the Age of the App. And it's all about book reading. And I've got like an hour and 20 minutes to answer Mr. Mendoza's question there. Now, this is from Joanne Henkel. It says, any advice to give a family member with elementary school age sons who have until this time limited video game use, but have introduced these because they didn't want their children to not be able to not be able. Do you recommend any good books to encourage reading? Okay, so that one we already dealt with. Good books. Oh yeah, the Bible, Spirit of Prophecy. There's so many good books. I'll email me. I'll take a picture of my bookshelf. Okay, I raid the Michigan Camp Meeting ABC used book section the used books. That's where you go to find great books. I'm running short on time, so I want to answer some of these other questions. But Mendoza, email me, scottritsema@gmail.com. Okay. Any advice to give a family member who has elementary age sons until this time have limited video game use, but have introduced these? Unintroduce them as soon as possible. And more importantly than just taking away video games, fill the time with yourself. I wish I had time right now to do the session called The Disconnected Childhood. It talks about the assault on the family and how we've got to restore that. And there is prophecy on that, my friends. It's the last verse of the Old Testament says that in the last days, just before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the hearts of the children and the hearts of the fathers will be turned toward each other again. So we know the prophecies about the breakdown in the family. Jesus said in Luke 12, it'll be 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. And 2 Timothy chapter 3 says that there will be disobedience toward parents and natural affections will begin to wane. And I've got all the research on how the family's been falling apart. It's tragic. heartbreaking, but hopeful when you read the prophecy that while the hearts are pointed away in the last days, they will be turned toward each other again in the home. So I want to dwell on that even more than just saying unintroduce the video games that this family has introduced. Yes, throw the machines away, get rid of video games. I'd like to see mom and dad ban video games from the household. You might say that sounds extreme, but you look at what Nicholas Kardaras is saying about just an innocent game like Minecraft. He says your brain on Minecraft looks like a brain on drugs, and how addictive these things become. But the more important consideration is how are we going to spend time together, love each other, smile a ton, and have a great time together, loving Jesus, loving his creation, and developing that deep bond. The number one factor in children accepting the spiritual values of their parents, in all the research, the number one causing factor, is that the parents bathed those spiritual truths in an atmosphere of relational warmth and connectedness. And that's what we got to get back to, that last prophecy in Malachi. All right, this one says, how can you help a YWO year-old and 3-year-old, does that mean 1-year-old and 3-year-old, get off video games, movies, and videos? Really, it's ripping the Band-Aid off. You just stop doing them. And it'll be painful at first, and there will be tantrums, there will be withdrawal symptoms. But going back to what I said a minute ago, the absolute key is to be replacing it with better things. If you're on my newsletter, you heard the story of Anisha and her children who were media addicted and misbehaving and everything. And she did the Dr. Victoria Dunkley media fast. And the results were incredible. If you want to read that story, just email me and I'll send it to you. scottritsema@gmail.com. And I'll send that right over to you. The story of Anisha. More questions here. Let me get my chat back open. I was going to go try to find the Anisha story, but that's going to take me too long. And I'm just about out of time. This one says, just follow up, like supposed apps fact brain power that improve brain power. Yeah, there are actually some platforms that are good for the elderly. Now we wouldn't want them on screens all the time, doing handwritten puzzles with pens and paper, crossword puzzles and that sort of thing. Things that activate the brain, so they're not just sedentary and watching TV, are very, very good. Deborah asks, how do we get your materials? I won't speak in great detail about that during the Sabbath hours, but beltoftruth.tv is a website that you will want to go to after sundown. You can always order our DVDs on our website, but this website, beltoftruth.tv, is where you can see all of our materials. And it's a subscription thing that we would discuss the details on, not on the Sabbath. So Deborah, you can just email me if you want to get a grasp of what that is a little bit more. And I believe, we've got another one here already, but it is 5:40. Ivan, am I done? I was told 5:40 or 5:45. I'm talking Eastern time.
That's correct. 45 is fine.
Okay, so I can squeeze an extra couple minutes here.
Right.
Former Seventh-day Adventist goes to Indian gambling place in Highland near Loma Linda to have a, quote, relaxed mind. Are the gambling machines with handles to pull the same as video games? Oh, wow. Boy, do you have 45 minutes for me to do my segment on digital pharmakia? You nailed it, Joanne. That's, in fact, not just video games. Yes, the video game designers have been open about the fact, and I quote them. If you want that session, it's disc 4 of the Media Mind. It's called Digital Pharmakia. And video game designers admit that they are using the exact same template, strategies, and methods that the casinos have been using for decades to get people immersed in and addicted to their games. And many of these game designers say, I won't even touch these games because they're so addictive. So they're making them, but they won't use them. You think the casino owner is in there putting his coins in the slot machine? Not a chance. Now, you mentioned the handle. With all the lights and sounds and cha-ching, cha-ching. That is not bringing a relaxed mind. This person is not correct in that. And I don't mean to be rude to them, but what it's doing is it's activating the pleasure receptors. You get a 400% increase in dopamine when you pull that handle down, because it's called a variable reward. You don't know if you're going to get the reward or not, so it varies, and that increases dopamine tremendously in the brain. That's why it becomes so addictive. The guy who invented even just a simple application on the phone as your smartphone, you know how you slide your finger down to pull the email or whatever down, and then it waits there for a minute, and the little ball circulates for a second, and you're trying to refresh your messages, right? They asked him, so you invented this little technique to get people into this ritual of pulling to refresh. Isn't this kind of like the casinos who cause you to pull down the arm of the thing? I mean, why do they still have that old crank machine there, right? Well, that's the whole purpose. All the sounds and the ritual of it gets you into the variable reward mode. So even you can get addicted to checking your messages on social media. I mean, we haven't even touched on social media today in this Q&A. I've got a whole session on that in the media mind. You notice I mentioned the media mind a few times. I'm a little bit more hot on that one than media on the brain at this point. As Christians, we ought to just know that worldly media, Hollywood entertainment, the worldly music industry is trash. And I expose it all, and I show you the demonic origins of it and quote the entertainers and everything. But the media mind is more relevant to even conservative-minded people who are like, I'm going to protect my children from media, but I'm going to get involved in it myself. And then, oh boy, I got into problems here. or people who would go to the casinos, and we're all potentially subjected to addictive habits, even if we have great principles about, not loving the worldly entertainment. But I mean, that's not to downplay media on the brain. It's still as relevant as ever in calling us to that high standard of righteousness that God calls us to in the last days. Last one. Hi, Scott. How about kids' computer work at their school? I only have 30 seconds. I think it's pronounced June, or maybe Hun. Forgive me if I butchered people's names today, but I have the session in the media mind called People of the Book in the Age of the App, makes the case for kids getting back to physical paper books and ink and number 2 pencils and paper. This is how Silicon Valley's children are being educated, by the way. Oh, I didn't even get into how the big tech people are all doing this very, very differently than the rest of us. And this isn't the most harmful thing, but we can do even better with academics than all of this ed tech. And it does become harmful when the educational technology, so-called, becomes gamified with all sorts of bells and whistles, and then that can be tapping into the same types of problems. But most of the kids are just reading on a computer. That's not the end of the world, but I would like to see getting back to books and paper. There's good research on that, and I lay it all out in disc 5 of the Media Mind, People of the Book in the Age of the App. Well, I'm out of time, Ivan.
Thank you, Scott. We could just sit here and listen to you for hours.
Oh, the questions are such good questions. We could do this all afternoon, couldn't we?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we want to invite people to our presentation this afternoon at 3 also, and the link is on our webpage on the front. It will also be restreamed on YouTube. But thank you so much, Scott.
And God bless. Take care, everybody. We'll be in touch. Send me an email, and then anybody can be on my newsletter, and you can email me back, and we'll keep the conversation going.
Okay, thank you. Bye, everyone.